All
Okay.
right, just in time. There's a song, right, called Just in Time,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
All right. Well, hello everybody, and hello Mark. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. And it's still early for Mark, so that's why he was making his coffee. And I'm very happy to have you, Mark, with us to talk about Recordame. And I wanted to see what your, what's your approach of this standard. And before starting, I wanted to play a quick track, also to give some time for a few more people to join in case. And this is a track from the album Riddle of the Sphinx, and I think it's actually going to be kind of related with the scales that you're going to talk about today.
Very cool.
right. Cool. So it's funny because it's this track is not necessarily um, what we necessarily identify you with, because you're really known as a bop, hard bop, cannonball adderley type of saxophonist, right?
Hmm.
So this track is in, and I think the album is very surprising for in that matter. So, um, all right, I think we got everybody. And anyway, for those of you who might be late or who missed it, it is recorded as usual, so you will be able to see it later. And before diving into the masterclass, I just wanted to ask a few questions for maybe if some people are not so familiar with you and your work. So, Mark, I believe you're originally from Baltimore, Maryland. Is that correct?
That is, yep, that's correct. Be
And
more.
and you're now in New York.
Correct.
And so you've had a long career, and you've worked with many top musicians. I was actually curious to know when, if there was like a specific moment when you were a kid, or when you started, or like, and when did you know that you wanted to be a jazz musician, and you know your life to
Yeah.
be about jazz?
Yeah. Well, I started, as you said, I grew up in Baltimore and I started very young. I was the youngest, or I am the youngest of seven. So I have three brothers and three sisters. So it was quite a bit of us growing up. And my parents, they always had music in the home. None of them were formally trained, but there was a piano in the house. My mom would always be singing. My dad would play the piano, and we had drum kits. And he also played the saxophone, again, not professionally. And long story short, as I was playing through the house one day, I discovered his saxophone and kind of started fooling around with it. And I'm about 7 years old at this point, until one day he comes home and he finds me in his room playing with the horn. And I thought, okay, my life is over. I lived a good 7 years. He's about to end my life now. But to my delight, he a month or so later, he came home and he had bought a brand new alto saxophone. He presented it to me. Again, long story short, he says, "This is yours. Leave mine alone." And so that was the beginning. But again, Alex, I had no idea what that meant in terms of where I am now, or even not even close to where I am now. Just being interested in pursuing music. Um, my father also was a preacher, so he had a church, small little church, and we would often, the kids, play in church. We would be the choir. Again, I had a brother who played the drums, another brother played guitar, another brother played trumpet. One of my sisters played the piano, and my other two sisters were singing. So we were the choir, again, a small little church, and he would often have us perform songs in church. Fast forward, this went on for many years. So by the time I got to elementary school, the fourth grade, I'm about, I guess about 8 or 9 years old, somewhere 9 to 10 years old, somewhere in there. I joined the band, and my teacher, and again, it's just all band music, but a big love of playing music. Fast forward again, all through elementary school, middle school, I get to high school. At the time, Baltimore had just formed a performing arts high school, very prestigious school at this point. And that same teacher who was my teacher in the fourth grade is now one of my high school teachers. And so I had to audition to get into school. I was delighted to see her. And I think at that point, you know, those are my teenage years. I'm probably about 13 or 14 years old now. I really wanted to play music, but I did not think I was going to be a jazz musician. I wanted to do more of. I wanted to play classical music. You know, I was.
Wow.
I wanted to do all of that stuff, and so I
Mm.
was. In fact, my high school teacher had studied at the Paris Conservatoire, and he had studied with Jean-Marie Lundet,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was deeply into that, all of that pedagogy, but still playing in the jazz band and all that stuff. I got to my first semester of school. I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C., only because I had always wanted to go to Berkeley in Boston, which I did apply and got accepted. But again, at the time, I wasn't aware, my parents weren't aware. I get accepted, the next thing that comes is a tuition bill. So they was like, oh gosh, we want to send you there so badly, but we just don't have the money. So my same teacher, Dr. Chris Ford is his name, he knew the saxophone teacher at Howard University, Reggie Jackson, Dr. Reggie Jackson. Again, I was pursuing, he was a classical teacher. I went there, but at the time I wasn't quite certain. In fact, I was quite certain I didn't want to pursue classical saxophone. Next semester, or during that semester, my parents helped me figure out how to get financial assistance. So I went up to Boston. Now I'm up in Boston with all of my contemporaries, so many wonderful musicians. One in particular, Javon Jackson. I'm sitting in his room one day, and he knew I loved Cannonball. So he was like, "Man, are you hip to the Japanese concert?" I was like, "No, I'm not hip to it." So it was probably were CDs around at that point. However, he played it for me. He played. Easy to love. And I thought, and of course, that version is like probably 5 times as fast as what I'm playing it. But hearing Cannon, because at that point, all I thought about with Cannon was Mercy, 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 Work Song, his funkier kind of stuff. And that sent me on a deep dive of wanting to play in that style. And I think at that point, that was the closer for me of saying, I want to dedicate my life. I really want to dedicate my life to playing music, not exclusively, but specifically jazz music, hard bop, and in the style of my biggest influence, Cannonball. I think, my latter high school years, but definitely my freshman year of college. That was the closer for me.
I see. Yeah. So actually, you answered my one of my questions already, since I was going to ask, which artist had the biggest impact on your playing early on. So you mentioned Cannonball. Is there any other player that were really important for you in your developing years?
Yeah, I mean, even before I got hip to Canon, I think like most musicians, I won't even put it exclusive to alto players, saxophone players. Charlie Parker. I think Bird impacted me equally as Cannonball did. And even back before that, I mean, before I really got hip to jazz, other players like who were sort of kind of more commercial players but could play jazz, Grover Washington Jr. being one of them, um, David Sanborn being another. Um, uh, and many others. I mean, the list is quite extensive. But I think if I had to put two or three, I remember speaking to Vincent Herring once, and he was saying he tell his students that they need to learn their ABCs. And at the time, this is decades ago, I was like, ABCs? What is this? Kindergarten? He said Adderley, Bird, and Coltrane. If you study those three, you're gonna be all right. So I mean, definitely, John Coltrane, Ben Webster, Dexter, alto players like Johnny Hodges, Benny Carter, so many great players I think are in the canon of, no pun intended, of how I approach playing my alto.
All right, cool. I see. And well, last question before diving into the masterclass. We mentioned all those musicians who have a very strong um, musical personality. How do you um, what can you advise to people who are trying to develop their personal voice on their instrument? We have a lot of saxophones today, but we don't have. It's not an exclusively saxophone masterclass, but like how do you? What could you advise for people to develop their personal voice on their instrument, be it the saxophone or another instrument?
Absolutely. Um, I think, and I'm sure, if not all, most of them are probably heard or aware of the importance of listening um, to people that they liked. People, for me, I listened to people that I liked and people that were referred to me. Even some people that I didn't have a strong affinity for. The idea is to try to have a broad awareness of styles, a broad awareness of sound, um, personalities in terms of the players. Like again, I mentioned Johnny Hodges. Johnny Hodges' personality is very different than, say, that of Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt is very different than that of like Hank Crawford. Hank Crawford's is very different than that of um, David Sam. Well, it's kind of close. But the point is that listen to a lot of players, not for the purpose of necessarily saying that I'm going to play exactly like that person, but I think being informed by different players will help any player, irrespective of an instrument, develop their own style, their own sound. And as you and I both know, I've worked with you on many of occasion. Most recently with Mingus is that you're going to be playing music of different bands and different composers outside of our own musical offerings, and we need to be aware of what those musicians' music offers. And the better we're able to understand what that is, not only will it make us employable, but it will also make the music sound authentic. Like again, I've done here in New York City, I've done a lot of Broadway shows, and I wouldn't play like a cannonball type of solo. If I'm playing one of my shows, I was doing the music of the Temptations. I'm not going to play, I've got sunshine on a cloud, a Temptation song, and they're gonna be like, "Whoa, time out! What are you doing?" So I think it informs the situations that we were possibly going to be put in terms of music. But more importantly, as a musician, the more information we have, the better we can really find our own voice and the influences are always going to be there, but ultimately we want to have our own personality. Like what we're going to talk about in a moment, listening to people like Joe Henderson, who I was fortunate enough to hear live and hear many recordings. And so when I play his music, I'm not thinking I'm going to play his solo. I wish I could, and I probably could if I spent some time transcribing it. but the idea is that I want to understand his ideology, his concept that can inform how I approach playing a song, or that of any other player for that matter. It's about perspective. It just gives you a deeper perspective.
I see. Great. All right. Well, thank you, Mark. So I let's dive in your master class, and let me know when you want me to put the PDF and the audio.
Absolutely. So again, I want to say thank you in advance to Alex for having me here. I know some of you have been working with him, if not all of you, for a while, and I've been looking at some of the lessons that have been online talking about Recordame. So I know you've been listening and working with this extensively. So today, I just want to kind of share a few ideas of how I approached playing over this tune, understanding that it can go down a rabbit's hole of taking one idea and just really exhausting it. So there were just a couple of ideas that I had been fooling around with the last couple of days, which kind of, as Alex mentioned, goes back to that first tune that he played opening up my introduction, Riddle of the Sphinx. That tune was called Marabi, and that tune, that whole record, really, I was at that point really interested in Moroccan music and Arabic music, and I had sort of started listening to a lot of Egyptian artists. One was a oud player. His name was Hamza El Din, fantastic musician. And another was a singer. Her name was Kulthum. Some people say Kulthum. But just hearing her play that style of music and hearing it, for me, it felt like it was like the blues. Now, mind you, we're talking about, you know, which is kind of one of the first things on this tune here before I have Alex show you. So I'll just kind of play the melody on that first section of the tune, just on that that A minor. Right? So